Hello and welcome to Pharmacy Inside Jobs, the PJ Pod series which aims to inspire you to take the next step in your career. Whether you're a seasoned pharmacy professional or you're just starting out, our goal is to provide insights into the increasingly diverse roles that exist within the profession. In each episode, we'll be joined by a guest to explore their career journey so far, with a focus on their current role and the opportunities, challenges and rewards that it brings. We'll also find out what skills are needed to succeed in their role and how you could follow in their footsteps, should you feel so inclined. I'm your host, Dawn Connelly, and in this episode we welcome prison pharmacist Kaniksha Aggarwal to the podcast. Kaniksha has been working in prisons for around 5 years and has recently founded Prison Pharmacy Connect, a platform dedicated to raising awareness of prison pharmacy professionals and sharing the lived experiences of people who've been on the receiving end of pharmacy services while in prison. She's recently completed the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer's Clinical Fellowship Scheme and is currently employed by Central and North West London NHS Foundation Trust as an advanced pharmacist specialist working in a men's prison. Okay, well, let's get started then. So thanks very much for joining us today, Kaniksha. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about your role as a prison pharmacist. So I thought maybe we could start by going back to your first day on the job. I was wondering if you could recall how you felt the first time that you set foot in a prison.
Yeah, so initially it was quite intimidating because you realise you are essentially locked up the whole day. If you don't have keys, then you are very dependent on someone else to even let you go to the bathroom, for example.
Right.
So it was quite intimidating, particularly walking onto the wings. It was quite daunting because it was a huge male prison. And it's one thing when you've worked in mental health, for example. In mental health, you have that understanding of security at the same time, ensuring that doors are locked. But you also have, I feel people have more compassion for those in mental health settings than they do in prison.
Right, yeah.
So those are some of the things that sort of crossed my mind, particularly when I was working there initially. But I did use my learnings from mental health. You know, someone once said to me, look, if there's anyone sitting around, if they're coming back from leave or whatever, you just have to say hello to them. It's not a problem. And that's kind of what I did in the prison, and I found that sort of broke the ice a bit better.
Yeah. What was the sort of atmosphere like on the wings? Because I guess we've all seen prisons on the TV and they're sort of loud and noisy and slightly intimidating looking or feeling environment. I just wondered, is it like that in reality, and is that something you experience as a prison pharmacist, or are you sort of, squirreled away in a dispensary somewhere? Tell me how it works.
So 2 aspects to that. Yes, what you see on TV can sometimes be the case. Yes, it can be quite loud. It depends as well on the size of the prison. If for example, it's association time where people are allowed out to wash their clothes or, go and shower and things like that, or collect their clothes from laundry, anything like that, it will be loud. And it does depend, I suppose. I've only worked in men's prison, so I can't really say too much for women's prison or youth offenders even. However, yes, it can be very loud in a men's prison. It's not that bad, though, I would say. And I don't know if there's partially the fact being a woman going into a men's prison. I tend to feel that a lot of the times they tend to be quite respectful to women. But to other men, for example, sort of male colleagues, they, I don't know, might have a bit of a chip on the shoulder or something like that. You will just notice the different dynamics towards different people and different genders, I would say, as well. But as a prison pharmacist, so yes, you can be in the dispensary screening prescriptions, but I like to see my patients as well. So if there is an opportunity to go onto the wings to speak to someone, particularly if they can't come to healthcare, then yeah, I will go and do that, because at the end of the day, if I need something to be clarified for a query, then it needs to happen.
Yeah. And how is that? How would you sort of describe your relationship with patients in the prison? Is it different to the relationships you might have had with patients outside of the prison environment, or is it the same at the end of the day?
That's really interesting. I would say in prison, people don't have control over anything because they're essentially behind four walls. I mean, they don't even have control over when they're going to shower. They have to wait for someone to open their cell door. So in that scenario, when someone doesn't really have any control, every piece of communication means the world to them. So if I was to say to someone, look, I need to look into something, but I will get back to you, the rule of thumb in prison, and I think anyone would be able to say this, if you say that to someone, you make sure you get back to them. And if you're not able to, you also communicate that. And you would think that might be common sense. Well, surely, yeah, that we should be doing that as healthcare professionals, but it doesn't really happen, does it? But in mental health, for example, that I've also worked in mental health. Like I said, I do feel there was a lot more compassion in mental health. There was a lot of stigma previously towards people in mental health settings. And I think we're doing well as a healthcare system to overcome that. But I think that is something we are not doing so well in prison. So again, the way that care is provided is still slightly different.
Right, I see. So when you talk about compassion, you mean compassion from people that are working in the prison?
Yeah, because there is that barrier. People think that, oh, well, you've done the crime, so do the time. But at the end of the day, if you're a healthcare professional, should you really be going with that at the forefront of your mind?
Yeah. Just wondering if you could talk a bit more about that stigma that you mentioned within sort of healthcare in prisons.
So a lot of the times, I think some people tend to have that difficulty in knowing to what extent they can really go above and beyond for someone in prison, because we're not actually told what crimes people have committed. We don't get access to that on our healthcare system. However, this is prison. You will find out one way or another. So it's about overcoming that barrier and still continuing to provide the care that you need to provide without judging that individual in front of you. So it's about putting that aside and remembering that your duty of care comes first to that individual in prison. Because at the end of the day, even on the outside, you don't know who your neighbour is. You don't know who that person is who you've just crossed the street. But because they're on the outside, you associate them with as being a good citizen. But actually, at the end of the day, they could be just the same as the person who you're providing care to in prison. So I think it's about ensuring that you don't let the care that you're providing being compromised just because someone has a past.
And has that been like a learning curve for you, or is that something you sort of felt from the beginning?
I think I would say I'm able to compartmentalize those sorts of things. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be working in a prison.
Yeah, I was going to ask quickly what your sort of coping strategies, because I'm guessing it must be a pretty stressful job at times. Do you have any coping strategies you could share?
So I like to keep the team dynamics very healthy. I do. We're trying to look at doing some away days. I keep reinforcing within the team what our aims are and why I am a particular way and what that means for us. So again, healthy team dynamics, ensuring that people understand the culture. And I think it's very important as well that you're able to leave work at work and have other things to look forward to when you go home. So I think that would be my coping strategy. Otherwise, it's very easy to let those emotions from work come home with you, and then you're not going to be able to sleep.
And what about issues like drug misuse and prescription medicine diversion and things like that? Because I guess all of those sort of potential issues could impact your relationship with patients.
To an extent. So I suppose that does depend on the policies within the prison as well and how robust the healthcare team are with each other. So yes, you do get diversion of prescription medicines, and again, depending on different policies, I would say that individual would need to be spoken with just to state, look, you're diverting your medicines you clearly don't need, then we're going to stop your prescription. And it's about having that conversation with that individual though, so they're aware of it. I think it's not so much about punishing someone, but it is very much about speaking to them to make them understand what steps you're going to take and why, and if they understand it.
It sounds like quite a difficult conversation to have. Did you sort of have any training in that sort of aspect of consultations and things, or
not at all? Not I wouldn't say for that sort of a conversation, no. Ideally that does really need to come from a GP, I would say. Anyways, they would probably need to be the one speaking to the individual. But from a medicine safety perspective, I haven't had any training, and I'm not really sure what training would I have. because as a pharmacist, I think it's very essential to be a people person. You have to know how to speak to people of different ages and different levels, different abilities. You have to. Otherwise, how are you going to provide the right care for that individual?
Yeah, yeah. Did you need any specific additional qualifications or training to go into the sector?
I think the only thing is you have a clearance check, which would be conducted by the prison, of course, and depending on which prison you're working at, sometimes it can be like a 5-year clearance check. So they would be looking at your five years sort of history, and you have to provide quite a lot of detail as well. But otherwise, you don't, as a pharmacist or even a pharmacy technician, you don't need any specific training yourself. If you've newly qualified, you can go in as a band 6 and you will be provided with training. Maybe if you wanted to, you can try the modules on CPPE, which give you an overview, but I wouldn't say they give you unless you're working there, you won't really understand it. It's a very generalized overview of working in prison.
Yeah.
So that's probably it. Yeah, you wouldn't really need anything in particular. Maybe have consultation skills ready as you would.
Yeah.
Have your basic physical health knowledge as you would again. So no, nothing in particular that you wouldn't be doing already.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked a bit about the team there and GPs. How does it work in a prison? I don't really know. Is there a multidisciplinary team around you, or like you say, is the GP involved as well? How does all that work?
For sure. So you do have GPs, you have psychiatrists, you have psychology, you have primary care nurses, mental health nurses, and pharmacy team as well. And again, it varies from prison to prison, but essentially if you do have a concern, you can always send a task, as we call it, to the relevant department to state, look, this is our concern, this is what we have seen, this is our documentation in the notes, would you be able to speak to this individual? And sometimes in some prisons they have a handover meeting at lunchtime where everyone is there, all the departments in healthcare, and if we have any patients of concern, we will talk about them together, which I think is a really, really good opportunity, because there are some organisations outside of healthcare that support people in prison. So one of them is, for example, called Forward Trust. The Forward Trust actually employ people who have been to prison as well. So it's really good to get an understanding from their perspective, from when they go to speak to individuals and from when we go to speak to individuals, and how we can work better together. Because essentially it's not just so much about providing the care whilst that person is with you, it's also about ensuring continuity of care. So if someone is going to be released or they're going to be transferred, what are we all doing to make that process more seamless?
Yeah. And are you employed by the NHS? Is that how it works?
Yes. So that is one way in how it works. So although the NHS does commission the healthcare service, the healthcare isn't always provided by an NHS trust. It can be provided through private companies as well.
Right, okay. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about the sort of skills and qualities that you think someone needs in order to succeed or enjoy the role of a prison pharmacist.
So one thing I've always said, and I've said this pretty much from day one, I think it's very, very important for pharmacists to have some experience of mental health, because mental health is massive in prison. The extent to which people's trauma is, it's very deep as well. And whilst people may abuse some of these medicines, they're not actually looking at the root cause. So as a pharmacist, having that holistic overview and understanding of mental health, you'll be able to just know which medicines are better suited. So mental health, I think, is very, very important. That's one skill. I would also say be prepared, for example, to leave your phone at home. That's one major thing which people don't understand. You can't take your phone in with you. Be prepared to also have these difficult conversations with individuals, because going back to the mental health aspect, a lot of people can be quite emotionally unstable. They haven't learned how to manage their emotions, which is probably why they've been in this sort of a lifestyle. And then when they come into prison, everything slows down. So it's about, you have to sort of encourage people as much as possible to take ownership for their own health, which not everyone likes to do. People like medicines as a quick way out. So I think it's very much about understanding, knowing your guidelines, knowing when you might need to work outside the guidelines, but then maybe have an MDT approach so you're not by yourself. Again, the skills I would say are very much similar to a pharmacist in any profession, but maybe have some better understanding of substance use and mental health. That would definitely help,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are some of the skills, and just a bit of resilience, because sometimes you are in situations whereby things can kick off on the wings, and they can be unpleasant. You know, people can be unpleasant towards you. I mean, I've had that situation. I've had someone threaten me. A couple of people threaten me, actually.
Right, I was about to ask, could you talk about sort of one of the most challenging situations you've faced and how you handled that?
Yeah, so I have had people threaten me. I mean, there was this one individual, he was very, very adamant about needing an antifungal cream, and that this antifungal cream was once only, because in his perspective, it meant once a month. But from a pharmacist's perspective, no, it's once only, meaning it's for once only use and that's it. And this individual was very challenging, because we did have to get the lead pharmacist and even the chief pharmacist almost involved to write letters. But at one point, yes, if there weren't any prison bars there, I probably could have been attacked. However, when he'd moved to a different wing and he saw me, I didn't back away or walk away, because at the end of the day, if you're a pharmacist, your duty does lie in providing care to people first.
Yeah.
And he was quite apologetic. I think that's one thing I found. A lot of people tend to be apologetic because they know that actually their behaviour wasn't appropriate. Yeah.
Maybe you could talk me through, I don't know if you have a typical day or week, but maybe you could just give an idea about your typical day or week.
Yeah. So, for example, if I was at work today, what would I have done? I start at 8. I would get into the prison, going through all the security checks, getting my keys, and then making my way to healthcare, seeing what prescriptions need to be screened, do any repeat prescriptions need to be issued. If there is a doctor on site and nurses on site, then just ensuring that have I got all the right prescriptions that I need from their clinics, just to ensure we can send them off so that people can get their medicines. I sometimes attend the morning briefing with the prison, so that's just to find out what's happened the day before, were there any individuals that were under the influence, and just making a note of that so I know what medicines they're taking. I find that particularly useful to go to, actually, because you also find out people that are put on something called an ACT, which is an assessment, custody and care treatment. I think that's got that right around. But if someone goes on an ACT, they're essentially at the risk of self-harm or suicide to themselves or to others. So that is also useful for me, because if anyone does have medicines in their possession, in their cells, then clearly they're not safe for that. So it's about ensuring I communicate that.
Right.
So I go to the morning briefings again, see what's happening, which is a really good way to meet the wider prison team. And then I will go through my prescriptions. I also do, so besides this usual prescriptions, I have other things like audits to undertake for safer prescribing in prisons. I chair a couple meetings as well. So we have a medicines optimization group meeting. So we have all the prescribers and the essential leads and even the healthcare governor, just to talk about some of the concerns that we're facing. There are some other wider prison team meetings as well, where it's essential for me to attend if we want to raise concerns about diversion of medicines, or if the prison have got any concerns about particular individuals, to say, look, we're noticing this, and then that's something that I can feed back to the wider team. So again, it seems to it's quite good collaboration when it works. But that's kind of my day.
And do you run your own clinics then?
Not yet. So we're currently going through healthcare renovations. So once that finishes, then I will.
Right. And what sort of clinics have you got plans yet?
Yes, so I'm just in the process of having this approved, but I think one thing that's needed is, in line with the medicines optimization strategy, is prescribing of antidepressants. So antidepressants are quite heavily prescribed in prisons, probably because a lot of people prefer to take a medication than to undertake therapy. Some people don't feel comfortable in speaking to strangers about their personal concerns, and I totally understand that. But then it's about reviewing them as well, making sure, are we prescribing to guidelines, are people just on subtherapeutic doses, and there's no reviews being done, what's the plan? So I think that would help the GPs quite a lot. Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the things, and then I'll see what else, if they want any other.
Yeah.
Clinic should be one, yeah.
What would you... It does sound like a really rewarding role. What would you say are the most rewarding aspects? And are there any aspects that you don't really enjoy?
So I suppose the most rewarding aspect is probably seeing someone when they come into prison and just seeing their care, seeing how, let's just say if someone was particularly unwell, and just seeing how they've transformed, whether they engage in courses, you know, if they've got a job, they're keeping themselves busy, they come for their medicines on time, you know, they are recovering and they have got plans for when they are being released. So I think that is quite the rewarding side of it, particularly working together with the wider MDT, of how we're all collaborating better. Because I think in a community pharmacy, you don't, for example, have that wider MDT working. A community pharmacist will sort of work in silos, will have to call up the GP surgery, speak to the nurses, but you don't really work together, I would say, to the extent that probably I would say we do in prison, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I can't say there's anything that I don't really like, because every day is very different.
Yeah.
It's never a dull day as such. There's always something going on, be it an alarm going off or someone going to the segregation unit because a phone's been found in their cell. It's a bit of a gossip at the end of the day. Or you hear about some of the ways people are bringing drugs in. It's all very different. So It's never really a dull day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing.
I quite enjoy it. Yeah, I do enjoy it. I think that's probably why I chose prison pharmacy, because I'd worked in quite a few sectors.
Right.
And prior to working in this particular prison, I actually did the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer's Fellowship. Mm-hmm. And I was in CQC for that. And I think it was there that I thought, you know what, I really, really just want to stay working in prison, because there is not much of an advocacy for people in prison.
Right. So you've talked a little bit about your various different roles, but I wondered if you could kind of take us through, we could go back to the beginning and take us through your career trajectory, and sort of talk about how you became interested in prison pharmacy. So did you have any career aspirations when you first started out after university, about which sort of sector you wanted to go into, and then how did things progress?
So when I was in uni, they offer work placements and things, and a lot of the times it's always mainly community pharmacy. Yeah. But in my third year, I decided to actually seek work experience in a prison at that time.
Okay. Why did you?
Yeah, so someone it was actually my mom. She was working in a library at the time, many, many years ago, and she said that they used to send books to a local prison.
Okay.
So then she said, why don't you try looking for some work experience? And I thought, okay, fine, why not? And that's all I did. And it took about 9 months to get the ball rolling, but I did eventually go. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Lloyd's Pharmacy was supplying the medicines to this particular prison.
Right.
And it was a really interesting experience. I mean, I was quite young at the time, and I was just told, stand at the medication hatch, and I've just got all these guys staring at me, and I'm thinking, why should I stand here? What am I going to do? But then you would think, well, actually, I could have said hello, right? Which I didn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Terrified.
because then you just think, this is really odd. I'm just standing in front of all these guys, and it's really weird. But
yeah.
I found that whole aspect just very interesting, just the whole environment. And I never thought actually I would go into prisons from that, because my thinking was, let's go into community pharmacy, because I've worked in community since I was 16.
Right.
So then by the time I finished uni, I'd kind of had enough of community pharmacy, but I did do my pre-reg in community. Mm-hmm. And I think at one point I had enough, and this particular time my dad was undergoing an operation as well, to the point that it was so risky that even if he did go for it, he could have potentially been paralyzed. So it was quite risky. Yeah, it was quite a risky operation. And I think from there I thought, because I could see his mental health deteriorating. Yeah. I think that's why I became interested in mental health.
Right.
So then I decided to look for some work experience in mental health, as I was helping him at home as well, because my mum was going to work and things, and my dad had to take time off work. It was just quite a lot. So I handed in my notice to community pharmacy, looked after my dad for a bit, and got some work experience in mental health. Wow. Which was, and I think that gave me a massive insight into providing care for people in mental health settings. That was the time where a very experienced pharmacist said to me, you need to start saying hello to people. And then that's when I did. And yeah, ever since then that I have been doing that. But from there, I worked as bank with them as well for a short while, and then I got my first job in the trust I'm currently working at, but as a
Right.
mental health pharmacist as band 6.
Okay.
And then I just completed the rotations, and I felt there wasn't anything more that the trust was offering.
Yeah.
So then I went on to NHS jobs, and there was a job role in prison, and I just applied for it. And
Yeah.
that's actually how I fell into it. So you have to just put yourself out there.
Yeah. And what about for listeners who might be wanting to explore a career in prison pharmacy? Is there a particular set pathway? Like, you obviously just happened upon this job advert, but I just wondered, is there a traditional route, or is it a case of what sort of experience? Do you need to get experience in other sectors first?
No. There are a lot of people that have only ever worked in prison pharmacy.
Right.
I think one colleague who I used to work with, she may have done a brief stint in community pharmacy, almost maybe in pre-reg, but then straight after that she went into prison. Mm-hmm. So from community to prison. And a lot of people do go in from community to prison mainly. So there is no set pathway. It's just very much about you knowing if you want to go down that route and knowing where to look for the jobs. I would say reach out to organisations, see if you can get work experience. That's one thing that I'm doing as part of Prison Pharmacy Connect, actually. I'm trying to work with organisations because a few people have come to me saying, look, I want work experience. So, and I think it's great to have that work experience to know if you ever want to work in a prison later on, because a lot of people, it is like Marmite. They will either love it or hate it.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this, taking a phone with you happens to be one of the biggest factors which might deter people from working in a prison.
Of all the factors that might deter people,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that
a
would
phone,
be it.
yeah, people would think, oh, I can't take because we're so used to technology and
Yeah.
things nowadays.
Yeah.
But again, there are also some that think, oh no, I couldn't work in a prison. I can't work with criminals as such. So there's no set pathway. I think at the end of the day, you just have to reach out to the different prisons, different pharmacy departments, and see if they're offering any work experience, if they're willing to take you on. Like I said, as part of PPC, that is something I am looking to do, trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah, what's maybe you could tell us, you mentioned Prison Pharmacy Connect. What is that?
So it is a platform whereby I'm raising awareness of working in prison, because I think often within the pharmacy industry, we only talk about community hospital and industry.
Yeah.
And I just think there is a whole sector of prison which is being forgotten about. And to me, it feels like it's not just the people that are residing in prison, but the people that are working in prison are also facing some sort of a stigma. So it's just about breaking that barrier and bringing us to the forefront of other pharmacy sectors. So that's one thing. And the other reason is because I think it's very important that we hear from people who we are providing care to, those we won't know what the quality of the care is like. And there are a lot of podcasts out there that talk to people that have been to prison, but about their prison experiences, not about their healthcare experiences, or even medicines. Because at the end of the day, and funnily enough, someone with lived experience said this to me. He says, you don't go looking for healthcare until you need it. You won't go looking for a medicine until you need it, which is why people in prison probably don't know that a pharmacist exists there, that they can speak to a pharmacist.
Yeah.
So again, it's about raising that profile, but hearing about their experiences, which I'll be doing soon.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And then finally, I just wondered about the sort of career progression pathway within prison pharmacy. Is there a set path similar to that, like you would find in a hospital setting, or maybe you could tell me about that?
Yeah, so again, it does vary, but my experience has been, so I joined prison as a band 7, but you can join as a band 6, and there is obviously the opportunity to progress to a 7. You can have the opportunity to do your diploma, to do a prescribing. So I did my prescribing in prison, actually.
Okay. So you're an independent prescriber?
Yes. So I did that in prison. I actually shadowed the mental health team for that. I did it in schizophrenia specifically, which was very interesting in prison. You do have the opportunity to undertake other courses like the Royal College of GP's substance use course. So they've got part 1 and part 2, because that will obviously give you a better idea about how to manage people on methadone and buprenorphine or alcohol and things like that. So there is scope. You can probably even expand your own scope of practice as a prescriber to do maybe some more detailed minor ailments courses, if that will provide benefit to the service. There is a lot of scope. It does depend on your managers, of course, as well, the needs of the service, your capacity, all those sorts of things. And you can progress to even being the lead pharmacist, even being the depending on how many prisons there are in the particular in the trust, you might even be responsible for a few prisons.
Mm-hmm.
So, working with commissioners maybe on a system level and things like that. So there is quite a way to progress. But I think you'll find that if those who work in prison don't always leave prison because they enjoy it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good sign that says that it's an interesting and rewarding role, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So now you've got to this stage in your career. What advice would you give your younger self?
So I would say maybe not to be as hesitant when you are going into the unknown. I think a lot of people tend to find that they don't like to take a step into the unknown because it's unknown. They don't know what's going to happen. So I would say just be a bit more. I should have been a bit more open-minded and maybe not seen people as criminals as such. Maybe see them as human first. Let's just peel off all of those layers and just look at individuals as human, and that might break the ice a bit better. And that probably would give me a better understanding of prison from day one, as opposed to a few years down the line where now I've got a good understanding.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I really enjoyed hearing about your role as a prison pharmacist. It was great.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
I love that conversation with Kaniksha. I hope you did too. She was so open and candid about her role as a prison pharmacist and the unique challenges and rewards that it brings. And she was really passionate too about reducing the stigma experienced not only by prison inmates but by prison pharmacy professionals too. And she also wants to raise awareness of prison pharmacy as a career choice through the platform that she's founded, Prison Pharmacy Connect, and debunk any myths about what it's like to work in these secure environments. And don't forget to listen out for her podcast too. Well, that's it for this episode of Pharmacy Inside Jobs. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Bye.